We're here with Greg Jacobs from Landmark Preservation. We're on the third floor of City Hall, and they have just finished working with the city on renovation restoration project of this floor. And I wanted Greg to walk through this space with us to talk about the work that they did with us to kind of bring this floor back to its beauty and make it really functional again, while respecting the historical integrity of City Hall, which was built and completed in 1906, and it's a really beautiful building. A lot of the original features have been preserved, but this floor was greatly chopped up by a lot of false walls, drop ceilings, and so there was a lot of work to be done to bring it back to what you're going to see today. So we're going to walk through the space, and Greg's going to talk about what they did and a lot of the creative problem solving they had to do, some of the challenges, and you guys are going to get a really cool sneak peek in some of the offices people don't get to go to very frequently. So Greg, let's go.
All right.
You know, one of the first things in here, like, we were missing some things you guys had to replace.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is this has always been a very hard-working floor. The third floor, when we first came on board, although it had been vacated, was still full to the brim of desks, cubicles, bookshelves, and years worth of furniture and fixtures needed for the city to operate. And one of the things we had to try to work through was understanding what level of detail still existed, because a lot of it was buried underneath drop ceilings, partition walls, wallpaper, acoustical tile on walls and ceilings, in some cases 3 or 4 layers of floor covering. And so we had to try to predict what we were going to get into, what we were going to find, and be able to create a budget that we were comfortable being able to execute the scope of work that had been prescribed. Very thankful to have been given the opportunity to do this project. One of the exciting and fascinating parts about this project was, from day one, we had to work very closely with the city to value engineer the scope of work to make sure that it fit within the budget that was given to the city to do this project. Now, knee-jerk reaction would say, wow, we have to cut money out of the budget, we're not going to get as much as what we want. The exciting thing about this process on the third floor was that a smaller budget meant we had to work harder to work with what we had and rely less on bringing in other new additions to the scope. And the end result is something that is a more accurate, more careful, and more sensitive restoration of the spaces and finishes. And we'll walk into a space right now and give you a first glimpse. So this space is going to be the city attorney's office. And you have to understand that when we first came into this space, there were drop ceilings, there was a large partition wall that ran right through the middle here, all sorts of built-in bookcases and remnants of old heating systems in front of windows, pipes everywhere, and conduit, communication cables, literally everything just kind of strewn about. And installed over time with the very best of intentions of making sure the city occupants of the third floor were able to keep working. But over the course of time, not really done with the best intents of the historic characteristics of the building in mind. So what you see in the city attorney's office is exemplary of what our approach was with all the spaces on this floor, which was to eliminate drop ceilings, conceal all modern systems to the farthest degree possible, repair broken plaster, repair missing and damaged millwork, and bring back the natural finishes of the millwork that you can clearly see here in the city attorney's office. Some of this was not in place, so we had to get everything custom milled to match existing profiles, match existing species of wood, and make sure that even the species of wood that we were matching for the millwork had a similar grain structure, so that once it was finished with the clear finish, it's a near seamless match.
So, you know, one of the things we had really hoped to do originally in the project was restore all of the wood floors. So that was, you know, one of our early hopes. Part of the value engineering to make sure we stayed in budget, we realized early on we would not be able to restore all the floors. But one of the things we made sure to do is in the spaces where we couldn't restore the floors and we went with carpet, the floors are still there. So in the future, we will still be able to go and restore those floors when money allows. So Landmark was really good to help us protect the areas that we'll work on in the future. So where you see carpet, we still have those wood floors underneath for the future. And another thing for me that was really fascinating to see is the restoration of the ceilings. You would be amazed at how many holes had been punched into the ceiling to accommodate things like networking cables, so we could have, modern technology and computers, and, this pipe was run here and that pipe was run there. And if you look up, you can't see any of that anymore. They did a great job filling in all those holes so we could have a beautiful ceiling once again at the full height of the space.
One of the other things that I'm particularly proud of about the approach for restoration on this floor is, again, in part due to a restricted budget, but in an exciting way, again, having to work with what we had, I feel that we were successful in being able to restore the spaces, not just the finishes, but the volumes of the spaces, and do it in a way that also preserves the history and the patina and the sense of time on these materials. The walls are not absolutely perfect as if they were just freshly plastered every square inch. Millwork still has dings and dents and kind of that warm character of time on them. And being able to walk that line carefully between what has been freshly restored while being sensitive and preserving that layering of history is really what good preservation is about. Good preservation in our minds means somebody who didn't see the building before we started walks in and says, "Wow, this is beautiful. What did you do?" If there's a very modern intervention, that would be clear, but in the case of good preservation, it's much more subtle gestures. And oftentimes that brings with it the idea of knowing when to stop, when to not go too far with something to make sure that you don't erase that feel.
Since Greg brought up the volume of the space, I think that was one of the most exciting things for me, sort of being a historian of City Hall. We have the original architectural drawings, so we could go back and use those to understand the original spaces. They relied heavily on those. We were able to take out the newer addition walls and go back to the original volume and spaces. And so these are the original historical floor plans. And this room, Greg talked about the wall that had been added in to split it into two offices. We're able once again to go back to the architect, Hyman Wickover's original spaces and volumes, and pretty much everywhere we'll see a couple rooms where they had to put in new partitions to accommodate our function today. But to go back to what the architect had intended these spaces to feel like, and so we can still do our modern business in that original space and volume. All right, so Greg, this is a fun space. Not everybody always comes to in City Hall. This is the bathroom. Tell us what you guys did in here.
This is the third floor bathroom, and this probably held some of the best surprises. The original scope of work called for a new dropped ceiling and the addition of kind of the typical restroom partitions you might see between stalls. And when we came into the space, we had to take off drop ceiling layers, deteriorated partitions, very old, not historic vanities, and floor coverings. And what we found was the original penny tile floor, remnants of the marble wainscoting. And although it wasn't in the scope of work, we advocated strongly to restore these features and bring them back instead of putting some new layer back on top. And in addition to the floors, one of the things that we advocated for was the idea of building toilet stall partitions, actually little rooms, and above which we could conceal some of the air conditioning equipment that otherwise would have had to be put above a drop ceiling in this main portion of the space, which would have completely obscured the top portion of the window looking out over the river. So we've taken a part of this project that was to some degree a footnote and a facility requirement and turned it really into one of the nicest spaces on the floor. And arguably, from those that have walked through and seen this already, the nicest restroom in City Hall. So probably there'll be people coming from other floors to to do their official business here.
So I think one of the cleverest things they did in here, of course, they restored the penny tile floor, which is a feature you see throughout City Hall, this exact same tile, but it was missing some tile. And if you look over in the corner, you'll see where the tile was missing, they were able to replace it in a very creative way. Tell us how you did the replacement tile.
Well, we had two situations. Here, this was the location of an original urinal. And again, being strict preservationists, not that we want to put a urinal back because we don't know exactly what it looked like, but it had been a sloped concrete slab floor. And instead of putting new tile in, William Santiago, the project manager, actually had 3D printed a stencil and spent countless hours with a stencil fine-tuning the stencil to make sure that it would work perfectly so that it could be painted using acrylic paints to replicate the look and color of the tile and preserve the original slab at the same time.
Greg, I wanted to show everybody one of my favorite features on this floor. As an archivist who works in vaults of various types all the time, City Hall was designed with vaults in every office throughout the building to preserve each department's records. And this office has the most intact vault as it was originally designed. So let's go look at this and show you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're showing this because it's virtually untouched from when it was first built.
It is, and still functional. So every office had, every department, as we might call it today, had a records vault. And they were, they had an outer door, and then they had very thick walls, and then a set of inner doors like this. And most of the outer doors have been removed, and they just have the inner doors. But the most interesting feature, and this is the only one I know of in the building that has retained it, they were faux finished wood, grained wood, to match the original wood trim. And this one retains its original lock. We still have the code for it. So finance, which occupied the space until they just moved out, used this and kept it locked for their records. So this is the most intact and fully functioning vault, and this will be part of the city attorney's suite, so they can use it. So it's a great piece of City Hall history dating back to 1906.
And from a preservation standpoint, decisions were made to literally not do anything with it. It is almost entirely intact. It has not been altered, so it has been left absolutely alone. We have done nothing with it at all to preserve that history.
So we talked a lot about preserving everything, but sometimes to function, we do have to add in some new fabric. So talk to us about this space.
Absolutely. This is a great space for you to see because this kind of captures exactly what Luciana is talking about, the idea that as a living building, sometimes alterations need to occur to keep the building alive and keep it as a functioning part of the city dynamic. Couple that with a restrictive budget, and what we're seeing in this space, a paralegal's workspace, is the need to add more office spaces and the need to conceal heating and air conditioning equipment. So the ceiling has what they call a drop ceiling cloud, which is kind of a partial drop ceiling. The original plans called for this type of ceiling treatment to be done in multiple spaces. And again, wanting to restore as much building volume, spatial volume as possible, we're able to eliminate that in all but this space. And so what you have here is one space out of the entire floor where a partial drop ceiling condition was necessary to conceal two different heating and air conditioning systems. And on this wall, you see two office doorways to create smaller paralegal office spaces. But we spent a lot of time discussing how best to do that in a way and a style that was appropriate, in a way and a style that clearly was not historically original, and in a way where you can clearly see where new meets old. And with that said, it has created some very, very comfortable office spaces.
All right, so we went from having one large space to basically 3 different working spaces, 2 offices and an outer workspace where they can all work together. So.
And again, clear focus on On what is new being painted, we did not attempt to try to match exactly the way the original finishes looked. And that was a conscientious decision to make it clear what was new, what is old. And these partition walls are attached and constructed in a way that years from now, when it's determined that these smaller offices aren't needed, they can be removed in a way that does little or no damage to the existing historic details of the building.
You know, I noticed another area where you differentiate between new and old, not just the paint, is while you have the same height on your baseboard, the original has that detail where your new is just a very plain profile.
Very simple, yep. Simple focus. And then all the woodwork, the original oak, being stripped and refinished. And it really, truly is beautiful. It had been recoated, in some instances covered in paint. So we removed paint, failed finishes, and refinished it all. It really sings.
And I might say, as you just looked out the window there is not a bad view from this floor, no matter what space you're in, whether you're looking north, south, east, or west. So I'm joined with William Santiago, who served as project manager on this project. He's been with us at City Hall now for quite a while, with our new partner here in the building. And we're now in the space that's going to be part of the law suite. It's going to be their law library. Talk to us a little bit about some of the special features in this, this space specifically.
Absolutely. One of the most immediate things that you notice here is that the floors are completely restored here. So I know, Luciano, you had talked earlier about that not being a possibility everywhere, and here it is a possibility, and it really sings. This room and the following room are really showpieces for this whole floor. That was difficult to do. There are many places where there are repairs in the floor, replacements of the original maple tongue and groove flooring that's here, and we were able to grab replacement pieces from other spots in the building, a pre-identified contained spot, so that we could get the same floor in the same building and not have any weird patches or differentiation in the wood. So I think that was a real success here. This room also was divided up with partitions historically, cubicles when we got in here, a drop ceiling. It was really something. And this is one of the rooms where we actually were able to strip off absolutely everything, all of the clear finish, all of the previous finishes, and get the wood back to its original state, and then finish it up with a stain and a shellac clear coat. And it's one of the most beautiful spaces on this floor and in the building completely, I think, right now.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I would come in periodically and kind of do a walkthrough, see where you guys were at. And when you took down the drop ceilings, in many of the rooms, you would see where above the drop ceiling, it would be painted. And below the drop ceiling, it would be wood had refinished at some point. So it was interesting how we just put up a drop ceiling and then we just leave everything above it, you know, one way. So you would have, you know, drop ceiling painted one way over on this window, totally different color over here. What were some of the different colors you saw throughout the room?
We saw a really pale, kind of like yellowy green color that was pretty popular. There was like a mauve, which unfortunately coated most of that next room over. There was blue, there was green, there was white. There's a lot. It was a whole palette, of course. One of the things that I think was really great about this space was, you know, doing just some research in the records and archives that you manage here. We noticed in a historic photo, one of the only historic photos we have of the building, on this floor specifically, from 1908, I think the 1908 city report, was a view looking down this room, and this door is open. And one of the things we noticed right away was that that door was solid. And when we arrived here, the door that was in place there was a half-light door, so glass on the top and solid below. So that really helped us analyze some of the other doorways we saw around here and kind of restore the language that had originally been intended, which is solid doors between private spaces and doors with glass facing onto the public spaces. So that was a really great thing that came out of just honestly having historic resources like the ones you provided us with.
Right. Yeah, that was good that you were able to restore that kind of relationship between private and public. The flooring does that. You have wood in the private offices. You have tile in more public spaces. And you see that throughout the building. I mean, those things define how the employees interacted with our citizens, for sure. So this is a beautiful room, and we're going to journey into our next sort of showpiece room. But there's something interesting in between the two rooms I want you to talk about.
So all of these doors here, like you can see on this door onto the rotunda here, have these beautiful original mortise lock sets with the seal of Savannah here cast in brass, unlacquered brass, which just patinas and tarnishes so beautifully. On this door, between these two spaces, we were missing a plaque here. We were missing a door plate. So we actually took some of the historic ones and took them to someone who could cast it for us. And we've got new plates cast for the doors with the original seal here. And so these are reproductions in unlacquered brass, just like the originals. And yeah, that's great. They're going to fit in really well here. They're going to patina over time, match what's going on here. And I'm really proud of these, honestly.
So I want to point out something that you guys left for us, and we had a good discussion about that. And there's these little things, and you might be wondering, and there's also some on the ceilings. They're on the sides of the doors, on the wall, and in the ceilings. What are those, and why did we keep them?
Okay, so these are locations, historic locations of original fixtures. So we've got wall sconces everywhere you see one of these along the walls, and there's more in that room for sure. But it was where the originally little wall sconce lighting fixtures. You can see them in some of the historic photos. Yeah, these beautiful little curved things with little glass shade there. And then on the ceiling, we've got the same things, and they're locations of historic lighting fixtures and ceiling fans. And we've left those as well, kind of near the ends, wherever they appear. They have the exact same cover everywhere that you see them. And the reason is we want to leave a record of what has been here historically. As you know, you're very much involved in preserving the record of what goes on in this building, and this provides a visual marker to what has been here historically. And should there in the future be some desire to restore those things, the marks, the locations are still evident. It's really, a testament to how our lighting and how our systems and how this building has changed in its use over time. Seeing those old photos of the little sconces, it paints a very different picture of the well-lit spaces that we have today.
Right, and we do have sconces that are in the stairwell and rotunda of City Hall. So we do have not only the photographs, but physically we still have some sconces left, so that there is some language that we could use if in the future they want to go back to sconces in these rooms. So all right, let's go in this room.
Yes. Yes.
So now we are entering the west half of the building. It's the biggest space, really, and one of the most beautiful because, again, we have the wood floor that was restored. So talk about some of the special things, or maybe some of the complications you ran into.
Well, both are many. Complications, there was a significant portion of deteriorated wood floor over in this section in front of this window. It appears that at some point in the past there was water entry or something and things had rotted away, and the entry had been fixed and addressed, but there was still evidence of the damage. So in restoring the wood floors, I would say from here all the way to here, about 10 feet out from the window is replacement flooring. And once again, we're using the same place that we pulled replacement flooring from for the other room, just one contained space, so that in the future, if that space needs to be restored to wood floor, it is a contained space, and there isn't just flooring missing from all over the building in random spots. But that enabled us, again, once we refinished the floors, to get a uniform finish, the uniform maple tongue and groove flooring. One of the other things here that was really difficult was also, well, two more things. One is the paint. There was paint absolutely everywhere in this building. Paint on the chair rail, paint on the baseboards. This entire door was painted top to bottom, this lovely mauve color that we talked about earlier. And this was the first place we actually tested our stripping methods to see if that would be a viable approach for this project. And it was, which is great. So this was our first test case to move into the rest of the building. And this room is also one that was completely stripped. Everything that you see in here was stripped down to the bare wood, then refinished. The other complication with this room was that there are pipes in this room that need to exist, that need to stay here for the function of the rest of the building. So we actually built some chases to conceal those pipes, but in a way that we feel like is sensitive and respects the history of this space. So we've got a chase kind of coming off of the corner column here that contains some pipes. And then this shelf we also built to act as a chase and conceal its nature as a chase. So there's pipes running under here with access as well, but it's been built into a shelf that looks sympathetic with the rest of the building. And then we match that on the other side. And probably one of my favorite features from this whole project is this bench, which we built over here. This is completely new, constructed of the same quarter-sawn white oak that we used for the rest of the woodwork here. But this is a chase that's concealing pipes that run along this wall. But we took cues from the benches that are in council chambers, the benches that are in all the stairwells, and used the same language to produce something here which functions as a chase and also adds something that is necessary and feels appropriate for the space.
Well, and employees that work throughout City Hall or even worked in this space are familiar with the pipes that run through all their offices and how unattractive they are. And so we can definitely appreciate how beautiful you have made something that unfortunately we live with. There's plenty of ugly pipes running around me. Yes. I believe it. Yeah. So this is great. Absolutely.
This space is also one of those two spaces that we have original photos of. And it's really fantastic that the two spaces are the spaces we've been able to restore completely. So this view is the same view that we've got in those photos that you provided us with of the bacteriologist laboratory. And now that we've actually gotten down to the original floors, you can actually see outlines on the floor of where the original furniture was, the furniture that you can see in some of those original photos. So a really special space.
Yeah, so in the archives we have not only those photos, we have the original architectural drawings, and we have the original furniture plans. So the architect sort of acted a little bit like an interior designer, where he laid out the furniture plans for each space, and said, oh, you need this furniture to perform your function. So. All right, William, thank you so much. And I want to thank Greg, both of you, for coming and doing this walkthrough and sharing with everybody, all of our citizens. I really want to stress to them that how wonderful City Hall is, and this is their building, and it's really important that we protect it for them and for future generations. And you guys have really helped us kind of move that next step by bringing the third floor back to its original glory. So thank you.
It's been a privilege.
Yeah, it's been wonderful.
So we look forward to keeping City Hall moving forward, making sure it's here for another 100 plus years. So thank you.